This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
The biggest icon in podcasting.
Welcome in, everybody, to this week's edition of Doc and Jock. I am the Doc, John Macaroon. We all survived the Detroit Lions draft. 3 days of greatness, Thursday, Friday, Saturday from Las Vegas, all the pomp and circumstance. It was crazy. It was so fast-paced. The Lions did not sit back. They were aggressive. In the second half of the show, we definitely are going to break down what the hell the Lions did and looking at what it means for the Lions' future, the targets that they got. Could they have potentially gotten different targets to make the team better? We're going to explore all of that. Joining me, as always, my guy, Adam, the Jock Strozinski. And cause all we can say is finally, we're going to start the podcast with news that we should have talked about back in episode 200. But the freaking Red Wings and the Detroit loyalty program that these head coaches got, Jeff Blashill really secured an additional 3 to 4 years that he didn't deserve. And it's so bad that you and I, when we talk hockey, are like, how much hockey are you watching? And we're like, nothing, a period. And we're like, yeah, exactly, because of the fact that these Wings just faded down the stretch. They watched like 5 games all year, and you're like, okay, good, they had a run. But then in the second half of the season, a complete collapse. So I'm so excited to talk about the dismissal of Jeff Blashill finally, and we could kick off the show with a rebirth of a team that you and I both love, but just haven't paid any attention to because it was basically a dead-end road with Jeff Blashill. Cuz, what up, baby? It's good times in Motown now. A new era for the Detroit Red Wings is upon us.
It is exciting, especially if you're a Red Wings fan. You no longer have this stigma. You no longer have, this head coach that, honestly, it felt like he divided the fan base. At this point, there were, honestly, at this point, it was probably closer to 80% wanted him gone, 20% wanted to keep him. But I know you specifically are so excited that he is gone, and I find that to be incredibly interesting because I find the dynamic that you and I have for this hockey team that we both love is just kind of polar opposites. And I don't think either one is necessarily good. I don't think either one is necessarily bad. It just kind of is, it's more of a statement on what we've kind of had to endure the last 10, 12 years with this hockey team. And you are usually the first person, you usually call it out before anybody else I know, where you want to exodus the head coach. You want to fire the head coach. I remember when Jim Caldwell was hired. We did a show. I was in Brazil, and you were back home in the studio, and we had agreed. And it was mostly you pushing that narrative, and I'll give you credit for pushing it. You were like, Jim Caldwell's not the guy who's going to win you a Super Bowl. He is the guy who is going to basically get you to the guy who should help you win the Super Bowl. We all kind of know how that worked out as we ushered in the Bob Quinn, Matt Patricia era, but you were on it from day one. With Jeff Blashill, I don't know if it was day one for you, but it was very early into his tenure. You were like, this guy doesn't have what it takes. He's not going to make this team better. He's not going to get these guys where they need to be. They need to move on. Fast forward 7 years later, he's finally gone. I find it very interesting that you have this quick hook with these coaches, and I think when the news broke on Saturday, you had to have been extremely happy that he was finally gone. I myself am a little bit more, let's see what they can do, let's try to build something, sometimes it's going to take a little bit longer, but you usually have a quick hook with these head coaches. How excited were you to send out that tweet that he got fired on Saturday?
Bro, you're exactly right. And here's why. It's not that I hate coaches or that I have, exceedingly high expectations. You can tell, when Matt Patricia, obviously when his calling card is defense and the Lions defense sucks and the bend and don't break doesn't even work, it's a bad sign. I mean, the first game was a telltale sign. The team didn't perform anywhere near their capability, and it just completely derailed. I was super excited, yes, because here's why. And it wasn't right away. It was about year 3, 4, that you started to say, wait a minute, the defense is not getting better. The players don't seem to be progressing from the start of the season to the end of the season. There's no tangible thing that the team does markedly well. So in the age of hockey, where especially it's usually like hockey, soccer, football, those are the sports where they have a quick hook. I mean, you have some franchises that will go through 2 coaches in the same year. And you got the Red Wings in a rebuild, and you're like, okay, you're tasked with a coach who's known to be a quality coach with young players. Okay, fine, that's the bullshit you're trying to sell me, so let's see it. You have these young players, and you start hearing that Anthony Manta's pissed. You start hearing that the locker room's not happy, they're not playing as hard, and you're like, okay. And then, just at the basic eye test level, no advanced metrics, no Corsi, no puck possession, none of these advanced metrics that people look at. I look at them, but just basically watching in 2017, 18, 19, the power play was a disaster. It would be pass, it would be disorganized, they just have a basically difficult time possessing the puck relatively long enough to set up a power play. And it was year after year. And then the defense, you just felt like, okay, the team does not have the capability of possessing the puck and skating from one end of the rink to the other without turning the puck over consistently. When is it going to stop? And 2017, 18, 19, 20, it never got better. They've tried to cycle through 2, 3 different assistants to try and spark the power play. And whatever the reason may be, whether you want to kind of be like the Athletic and give excuses for Jeff Blashill saying that the Wings didn't give him enough, they maybe didn't give him enough to win the Stanley Cup, but they definitely gave him enough to get to the playoffs. Come on. I mean, you have young players across the board, and I think that, yes, the Wings, after 25 years in the playoffs, that first year was jarring, but 6 consecutive years not in the postseason? I mean, come on. This is Detroit. The expectation should have been higher. So you can harken back to 2018. I was like, go get anybody else. Go get somebody that can come in and light a fire under these coaches. And it was interesting, too, because you would think, and I'm curious to get your assessment of where this went wrong for Blashill, but Steve Yzerman did an interview, and one of the things he said, which caught my attention in the midst of him trying to explain everything in word salad, trying to deflect everything.
It was some word salad.
He said that he wants a coach to ride these players and to be a hard ass. He's in line with bringing in a Scotty Bowman, which makes no sense because that's kind of how Jeff Blashill was, in that he was a coach that got on the players and things like that. It was fascinating to hear Steve Yzerman say that we want to see improvement, but we want to see a coach that's going to get these players to perform. So it was just a disaster. It was a disaster that you all saw. 4 seasons. Okay, fine. You don't want to do it in 18. You don't want to do it in 19. But come on, 2020. I mean, it's no matter how much you love Steve Yzerman, for me, this is strike one. The fact that Jeff Blashill got 2021 and 2022 season to kind of just sit there and have a wasted year. In sports, you don't get to do that. And for me, it's only strike one, but it was an epic mistake to bring back Jeff Blashill this year. A wasted year and something that you recognize was going to happen, so why not start the development 1 year sooner? I think you could have had a playoff opportunity if you had a different head coach.
Well, I think you said something that was interesting. It was more a question. Where do you think it went wrong? And I think your point regarding how the power play never got better. There were metrics, and like you said, not advanced metrics, just year-by-year metrics, where this team didn't show any growth. This team didn't get better on the power play. This team didn't get better in its own defensive zone. This team didn't get better possessing the puck. This team didn't get better making those bonehead plays where you end up with odd man rushes and you've got a guy who is a forward basically playing defense because your defenders got caught. Like you didn't get better at any of these things. You didn't clean any of these mistakes up. And I heard the same interview you heard. And there was a lot of word salad, like you like to say, with Steve Yzerman trying to, I'm going to say he was trying to do Jeff Blashill a solid and not throw him under the bus. And I think what happened, and you're right, I think it was probably year 4, where there might have should have been a change. There definitely should have been a change. But I think what you had was a general manager come in who really assessed the situation and was like, holy cow, this is way worse than I ever thought. And he's seen the development that he got out of the guys with Jeff Blashill when they were in Grand Rapids. And he knew that coming down the pipeline, though a lot of those players that he had worked with were coming up. So I don't think he wanted to necessarily rock the boat. Last year, it should have been the year where Jeff Blashill was showing the door and giving his pink slip. It wasn't. They gave him one more year. It was kind of the last hurrah. It was like, get it right, let's see what happens. They start the year, and they win a couple of games that they probably shouldn't have. There were points in the very early in the season where this team looked good, looked like they might contend for a playoff spot or at least be in the hunt late in the season. And then we got to the middle of the season and we got later into the season where things just completely fell apart. And you can't have games where you're getting annihilated 7-0 and then turn around and you end up winning games 11-7. Like, you just can't have that. Like, that's not how today's game is won and lost. At least it shouldn't be. If you're a good team, you're not giving up 7 goals. You know what I'm saying? If you're a good team, you might be able to score 11 goals, but you sure as hell aren't giving up 11 to a team that you're putting 11 on. And this team just didn't show any growth. This team, I think it's missing something, right? It's missing a little bit of grit. It's missing a little bit of nasty. And the thing I took out of the interview with Steve Yzerman is, you said that he's looking for somebody to come in and kind of be a hard ass with these players. And I don't necessarily think it's somebody coming in being a hard ass, but he's looking for somebody to keep these guys accountable. He's looking for somebody to hold these guys to a standard. And whether that is the Red Wings standard or whether that is the Steve Yzerman standard or whether that is just a winning standard, he's looking for somebody to hold these guys accountable to a standard so it translates to wins and losses. You and I have talked a couple of times about Dylan Larkin. I don't think either one of us are a huge fan of Dylan Larkin as the Red Wings captain. The thing is, he's local. He's a Michigan product. He was one of those guys who got to skip Grand Rapids and come right to the big club. And you kind of set yourself up to where now this is going to be your guy. This is going to be your captain. In hockey, and specifically with the Red Wings, the C doesn't get changed a whole lot. It doesn't get moved off of somebody's sweater just because. Captains don't just get traded. It's not how it works in that league. So you end up with Dylan Larkin as your captain, and maybe he's too young. Maybe he's not, I don't know, I guess a hard enough guy to where he can hold guys accountable, and maybe he just doesn't have the accountability. But you and I have both said multiple times, on a good team, he's maybe your second line center, probably your third line center. He's not your number one center. He's not the guy who's going to get it done. And we both understand that you don't necessarily have to be the best player on the team to be the captain. We both get that. But I think when you're a young team, when it's a young organization and you've got guys trying to fall in line, it is really hard when you're not the best player on the team to hold other people accountable. And Dylan Larkin isn't the best player on this team. Last season, I think we both agreed Todd Bertuzzi was the best player on this team. I think you could make an argument that Lucas Raymond in year 1 is a better player than Dylan Larkin is, at least offensively. I think we would both agree probably the most exciting player on this team with the highest potential right now is probably Mo Seider. So I think it's really difficult when you give the C to a guy who isn't the best player on your team, isn't a guy who has really, I guess, grown exponentially in different areas on the ice, right? He isn't a guy who maybe conducts himself as that hard ass or as that leader that holds other guys accountable. You got to remember, Dylan Larkin was a kid when he came in, and he was primarily surrounded by a pretty young locker room. It wasn't like there was a ton of old heads in there basically showing him the way. It was a couple of guys like on that third line who were like, all right, kid, it's on you now. And you can't have that when you're young. So I think this, from the get-go, has been an organization trying to get back to its heyday, but really did a bad job and kind of self-sabotaged itself with bringing some of the talent along and then putting them in position to be leaders. I mean, I don't believe Dylan Larkin is a very good leader. I don't believe Dylan Larkin is necessarily captain material. I think Dylan Larkin's a fine assistant captain. I think Dylan Larkin is a fine player, but I don't think he's in a position. I don't think this team's in a position where you can just have a guy who's a fine player telling other guys what to do, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, absolutely, it makes sense. You look at it and you say, look, though, you still got to give Larkin credit. Battled through some personal things and still had a 30-goal season, so he's trending upward. But the question that we have is maybe not on the ice, but off the ice. Leadership. Where was the player-led movement when you're getting your tail kicked in night after night? Where's the leadership? That kind of speaks to what's going on here. Why did this? Why? Because it's so weird, because the way the season played out, they kind of hit a peak there where they were playing well against playoff teams. And then you have the break where you expect, okay, you regroup, you look at what's going on, and then you come out and you just completely tank defensively. And in that sense, you look at it and you say, what the heck happened? Why was the leadership in that regard? Why were the players allowed to have that to happen? And why did it go south to that degree? Now, of course, the Verana injury was terrible. You didn't get the likes of the goaltending that you maybe thought you did. Grice and Nedeljkovic, and he kind of became a head case a little bit there in the second half of the season. So you look at it, and I'm curious, I want to get your sense of it and ask you the question, who was more at fault? Was it Jeff Blashill or was it the Wings? Did the Wings do him a disservice, or was it Jeff Blashill not doing what he needed to do to keep his job? Because for me, I can't go with the narrative that Jeff Blashill wasn't given enough. It's a National Hockey League. You're given what you're given. And in the end, I can't buy the narrative that he's a good coach. He's simply not.
Yeah, I think in this league, you're going to figure out a way to win, right? And there are some teams where it is absolutely horrible. And there are other teams where they're just stacked with their lineups. I think with Jeff Blashill, I just think he wasn't the right coach for this team. I think somewhere deep down, he's probably a good head coach. I just don't think he was the right fit for this team with these players. And I just don't think he got the job done. When it's all said and done, he just didn't get the job done. And it goes back to what I said earlier, right? And it was kind of building off of what you said. You just didn't see the growth in a lot of areas where you would expect a prime focus to be spent, a large part of practice to be spent working on the power play, getting guys in position. When you have a 5-on-4 advantage, a 5-on-3 advantage, you should score on those opportunities. Not going to say you're going to score every time, but you should score. So be creative. Come up with a way to develop a play to get guys open. Develop a play to be able to generate shots and then crash the net. Develop plays to get players in positions to succeed, and I just don't think he did that. I don't think you've seen the growth in the development in a guy like Dylan Larkin. I don't think you've seen the growth in the development in the power play. I don't think you've seen the growth in the development in the defense. And I think all of that kind of led to his undoing. I think a guy where he really did develop and really did play maybe a little bit above his head and maybe took a step back this year was a guy like Todd Bertuzzi. Thought Todd Bertuzzi, or say Todd Bertuzzi? What am I doing?
Tyler
Bertuzzi. I said Todd, didn't I? I think Tyler Bertuzzi was a guy where when he was kind of brought in under Blashill's wing, really excelled, and then something happened there where I think this year he took a little bit of a step back, and it just didn't necessarily work, didn't necessarily click. But again, he's also a player that plays with a little bit of that nasty, has a little bit of that gritty to him, and I think that pays dividends when you're willing to go into the corners, when you're willing to work in front of the net, when you're willing to do things that 90% of the other guys on the ice aren't willing to do, you tend to get rewarded. And I think this team needs more of those guys. It's great to have superstars, right? But you always need that SOB out there to be able to do things that not everybody else is willing to do. I think a guy who doesn't get enough credit for the way he plays and for being as good as he is a guy like Alex Ovechkin, right? You have a lot of fans who end up comparing Ovechkin and Crosby, right? Crosby's the pretty boy, doesn't necessarily do the dirty stuff, and when he does do the dirty stuff, he is actually being a dirty player. He's not going into the corner to win the puck. He's going into the corner with the elbow high. You look at a guy like Alex Ovechkin. Ovechkin is a goal scorer. The guy has a lot of finesse in his game, but the guy is also willing to lay the body. The guy's also willing to go and dig the puck out of the corner. The guy is willing to find the soft spot in a zone and get open so he can put pucks in the net. And a lot of guys don't do that. And I think that's where a lot of coaching and a lot of working one-on-one with players, I think where that fell short for Jeff Blashill. I think it's Jeff Blashill's fault. I think it's a good question for you. What I find interesting is you are usually pretty hot-tempered about this stuff. You're usually, look, they got to go. They're shit. I'm tired of it. I'm over it. I don't want to see it no more. It's funny because I'm a little bit more apathetic.
Yeah, because
I'm like, all right, whatever.
Because in the pursuit of championships, remember this. I came of age at 18 in 1997 when Scotty Bowman was there, and we seen the lead up as a youngster. You saw the Jock DeMeres, you saw the Murrays, you saw all the coaches beforehand, and then you saw the OG. And then the same thing happened with the Pistons. You had, the Rick Carlisles. You had the others that were not it. And then Larry Brown comes in and you saw something. You saw buy-in. You saw talent. You saw the collective quality of a head coach. Same thing with baseball. You had the crumb bums. You had the terrible managers, one after another. Oh my God. I remember, when I first started just going down to games and the Tigers fired, a manager right there early in the season only to bring on another one that was horrible. And then you finally get to Jim Leyland. And what does Jim Leyland do? One series he saw in a game. I'll never forget it. Nobody will ever forget it in town. He saw one series where the team was, playing a getaway day and the team played like shit, like absolute shit. No effort. They played awful, and he was like, oh, hell no. I'm coming in here to turn this shit around. I don't care if we win or lose, but we're not going to have a performance like that. The fans here in Detroit deserve something different. And that was back in 2006. And what happened? Boom. You had a turnaround just that quick because the bullshit stopped. The bullshit stopped. And it was, it was, the manager that I was talking about was, I think Larry Parrish got fired in 99, at some point, and then Phil Garner took over, and then, Phil Garner got fired and they replaced him with Louis Pujols. And that was just abysmal. And then you go from him to Alan Trammell, which was really a great disappointment. Yeah. So then you go from Jim Leyland to Brad Ausmus. So we have a history throughout this podcast of seeing coaches that don't have it. And you recognize, okay, they don't have it. It's not there. But remember, we're not the ones paying the millions. And coaches get 3 to 4 year deals. They get extensions, and there's big money involved. And cheap ass owners don't want to cut loose and pay a bunch of guys that are not working. Fine, so be it. But there's no bullshit. You can see it. We watch games, and you can see a team that is not taking the step forward. That's why there's a little bit of hope with Dan Campbell, is that the team tried hard and that there's a lot of passion and things like that. If you give him talent, potentially there's something there. And now you got to see it though. In year 2, he's got to correct the decision making on 4th down. He's got to make more correct decisions. And that's just the case. And if that's not the case, then the same kind of commentary will be coming out of this chair, is that you can tell leadership easily in sports. You see trends. You see improvement. You see something. Okay, with the Wings and Blashill, you just never saw it. Yeah. And whether it was a disconnect, whether it was just the fact that he didn't have what it takes to do the X's and O's properly, it doesn't matter. You saw it. We knew it. I knew it. It was just waiting. In essence, it killed the love of hockey. Like I said, I haven't watched 25 games in the last 3 years. We don't talk about it. Detroit Podcast, we talk about everything. We talk about jokes. We talk about this. What's the one thing we're not talking about is the Wings, because it's terrible. Every year we get excited for the first 3-4 games, and then it just tails off because the Wings don't play the way that we want them to see it. So now I put it to you because I know you and I are excited that Steve Yzerman gets to make his second big decision now with the Wings, and it involves bringing the next guy. And there's an extensive list, those from college, those from overseas, former teammates. I think a lot of people are looking to the Islanders and their assistant who's got a lot of experience, who played with Yzerman. You're looking to potentially the college NCAA champion out there in Denver, who's very young. I don't think he gets the job, but he's got a couple young talent that are prospects that he's coached. I think you could look overseas to the likes of a Larionov, who's had a tie with the Red Wings. I don't think Fedorov gets the opportunity just based on, whatever the deal is with him and the Wings, based on his desire to leave for Carolina. I think it's going to end up probably being the coach, the assistant from the Islanders, because of the fact that he's got a tie to Steve Yzerman. But at this point in time, officially on the record, Yzerman has the long list that I know you have. Now he's going to go through and narrow it down to get the people that he wants. So right now the big board for the Wings probably has like 10 names on it, all across the landscape of college coaches, European coaches, former players, former coaches. But soon, probably before the draft, which was a timeline given, Steve Yzerman will figure the shit out. And I think eventually he's going to make the right hire and bring in a coach that's going to take this to the next level. And it'll be his hire, and he'll be on record. Jeff Blashill, he kind of was the scapegoat. Sorry, Jeff, that was your deal. That was always going to be the deal. And now, with the rebuild in phase 2, let's get the coach here that can make some exciting things happen for this Red Wing team. Who is it? Cause give me the names, give me the guys. Tell the audience who you think it's going to be based on what you know.
So this is kind of where I'm at with it, right? And Steve Yzerman has come out and basically said that he's not 100% sure who it's going to be yet. When he hired John Cooper, he knew he wanted John Cooper. He said at this point he doesn't really know who he wants. Or at least that's what he says. Now, you can believe what you want to believe. But I think if you're going to hire the next guy, he does have to come with a little bit of experience. I don't think this is a guy that you could just go to, St. Cloud, Minnesota, and pick up whoever their college coach is, bring him in and be like, hey, you're going to be all right. Go ahead and do some things. I think you need a guy who has had experience working with players, helping develop players, getting guys prepared. At the very top of my list, similar to yours, Lane Lambert, the assistant coach over in New York with the Islanders. After that, I do like Travis Green just because he has a bit of a history. He's worked in the NHL before. Also like Joe Montgomery, again, another assistant coach working with St. Louis right now. After that, if you need to kind of take a shot in the wild, just kind of throwing a dart at maybe a young up and comer. And I don't necessarily like going the route of going international. I think the international game is constructed just a little bit different. The rink's a little bit bigger. The play tends to be much faster because you do have such an open ice. You're allowed to kind of get away with some things. I think when you get to the NHL, things slow down a little bit. It tightens up defensively, and you've got to be able to break through that defense. So I don't necessarily like going with a guy like Larionov or Fedorov, and I don't think Fedorov even gets the look because similar to what you said, it's whatever's going on there, and nobody will ever know. At some point, there'll be something that'll come out, and we'll be like, oh, okay, that kind of makes sense, or we'll be like, really, that was it. But as of right now, neither one of us. And I don't really like going with any of the European head coaches, just again because the international ice is a little bit different. But Dennis Wolf coaches in the WHL. I think that's a guy who he has experience working with guys, has experience with building guys up, but that's like the one guy that from a minor league system that I think could come in and help out. But for me, top of my list, it's the New York Islanders assistant coach Lane Lambert.
Absolutely. And then finally, I think just like all sports fans in Detroit recognize the two hardest jobs are the quarterback of the Detroit Lions and the goaltender of the Red Wings. And simply put, you can't go through the NHL and have a second or third rate goaltender. And for whatever reason, they've invested in Grice, they've invested in Nedeljkovic, but whatever reason, it was the funniest shit ever. And we're going to talk about the Lions in just a few moments here, but it was the funniest shit ever. I have never seen, with that much regularity, a coach pull his goalie only then to put him back in the game. A double pull in multiple games? Like, what the fuck? He pulled Grice for some reason. Nedeljkovic would come in cold, give up 3 goals in a 9-0 rout, and then put Grice back in. Like, what the fuck? Just let Grice take the beating. You know what? And it happened repeatedly because the defense was so porous. They had no presence to make shit happen. But I'm excited for Verana. I'm excited for Bertuzzi. I'm excited for the young cats that are going to come in, and it's going to be fun. Like you said, Mo Sider, the Europeans that are going to come in. It's there. It's 2 years away. I feel it. You just got to get a goaltender, and you got to get a lot better defensive system that will get you over the hump when the time comes. And that's what Yzerman expects, and I think he's going to get it. Because when Steve Yzerman looks to have a task and he makes a goal, the shit goes down. So we still have confidence, but he's got strike one in my book for keeping Jeff Blashill 1 year way, way too long. All right, cuz, second half of the podcast, man, I love it. Talk half hour about hockey just off the rip.
We don't ever talk hockey.
Yeah, but
it's interesting that we're able to go 30 minutes nonstop. We could probably do another 45.
Yeah, exactly. Recapping the season, but it's just a disappointment all the way around. You know, especially with the start. But, you know, like you saw, steadily increasing win percentage, steadily moving up the chart of points. So maybe next year they can get into the 80s in the point range. Hey, let's go. Get the goaltender. Let's go. Stop bullshitting around. The Wings deserve to get back into the postseason. It hasn't been right. 6 full seasons, cuz. Get out of here. That's almost the full length of the run of this podcast has been without significant playoff hockey, and that's a disgrace. But after a long weekend of the draft, I think it's great that we record just a few days later when we can let the dust settle. We can let a little bit of the emotion subside, and we can factually take a real strong look at a draft class. And I'm happy with what Brad Holmes was able to accomplish when you recognize what he was looking to do. Aiden Hutchinson, we can debate, and we'll end up talking about it, obviously. Aiden Hutchinson, first and foremost, everyone knows I'm a Michigan State grad. So personally speaking, that pick I can share with you, when it was made, I was hoping it was Kayvon Thibodeau. But you guys knew we had mock drafts at SIO Lines, multiple ones in the week leading up to the draft that said it was going to be Hutchinson. I was the fanboy and just saying, please don't make it. And I honestly, when the pick was made, I felt down. I was like, ugh. And I was like, okay. But then I saw the numbers from what you guys want to read about Aiden Hutchinson, and my spirits picked right back up because you guys love yourself some Aiden Hutchinson. So fine. Okay, fine. You want to play that game and you want to just indulge in consuming all of the Aiden Hutchinson content? Fine. I get it. You broke the blue wall down. We got it. And you can go read all the Aiden Hutchinson love because I can share it now. I'm not hiding it. I don't have to hide shit anymore. If Aiden Hutchinson farts at Costco, we're going to report on it at SIO Alliance. So get ready. It's the Aiden Hutchinson channel for the next 4 years because it is ridiculous.
What about that 5th year? They get that 5th year option.
Yeah, 5 years too. Cause if everything Aiden Hutchinson is like ridiculously read at a higher level than everything normal. Even the stuff that's normally read, like mock drafts and shit like that, it's Aiden Hutchinson hour. My God, you guys balled out and loved yourselves some Aiden Hutchinson. Fine. Let's see what he can do. He's got to go out there and prove it. The pick that shocked everybody was, which kind of made it a better night for us, but still a long night, was moving up to number 12 from 34. So doing that for Jamison Williams shocked everybody, and I think that'll be a source of the 2 biggest debates. When you look at the later rounds, you got the talent. The debate will be, did you wait too long at linebacker? Did you really need a tight end? And the biggest theme that is going to piss everybody off is going to be where you took certain players and positions. But first and foremost, I don't know how much trust Brad Holmes has in the athletic department, but there is a clear theme that they ain't scared to draft players that are coming off of ACLs.
Yeah.
Jamison Williams, you look at another player that also had an ACL injury, you're like, what the heck is going on in regards to taking players that are coming off of an injury? The tight end they drafted is coming off of an ACL injury. And you're like, okay, is this going to go the way of Ryan Broyles or with Jamison Williams? I'm concerned a little bit in regards to what can happen in his return, but from all accounts, his ACL tear was clean, surgery was clean, and he should be able to get back to being the speedster. So we'll circle back to Aiden Hutchinson, but he's not going to get top billing on this podcast. Oh, hell no. He's always going to be 1A, no matter what. We'll talk about him, but he ain't going to get top billing on the podcast. Let's start with the juice, the swagger. I thought the swagger was going to be Kayvon Thibodeau. They got the speedy Jamison Williams. I love the pick had he not torn his ACL. I might have, in that case, just kept 32 and 34. You could have had Christian Watson. You could have had somebody else that you look to in the later rounds like you did before. But I get it. You understand why. The reason why, guys, it's not inside info. It makes sense based on the trends in the National Football League. These wideouts want to get paid like a shit ton of money by year 4. And Brad's like, okay, I want a stud wideout, but I want to keep him and treat him like a quarterback and have that 5th year. So they did it for a wide receiver for the guy that they believe in. So it's a swing. And if you read SIO Line, if you listen to the podcast, if you watched any of the previews, we said Brad Holmes told us he was going to be aggressive. He, in essence, made it so that we could read into it, so that we could say, okay, maybe potentially they're going to trade up for Drake London or one of the others. In the end, it's Jamison Williams. I'm so fascinated. You didn't blow up on Twitter. You had a fair reaction all the way through. What was your first reaction to the big blockbuster trade of day one? The Lions basically giving up just a 3rd-round pick to move up 20 spots. In the value chart realm, the Lions got over.
The trade up was absolutely crazy. Like, they got so over by giving Minnesota what they gave them, and what they got back in return was absolutely bananas. Like, great job by Brad Holmes with just, 1, being aggressive, 2, figuring out what you want, and then just go and get it. A lot of times these general managers don't do that. There's a guy that they want, there's a guy that they're really high on, and they'll just try to wait for them to fall to them. No. Brad Holmes was aggressive. Brad Holmes knew what he wanted, and he went and he got what he wanted. And the way he went about it, absolutely fantastic. The deal he pulled off with Minnesota, kudos to him for that. Now, the player, I don't necessarily have a problem with. ACLs get fixed all the time. Generally, ACLs, once they're repaired, they're stronger than they ever were. You don't necessarily have to worry about them re-tearing. Now, they can re-tear, but you don't have to worry about them breaking again. This player would have been the number 1 wide receiver had he not tore his ACL. Had he not broke his knee, he would have been the number 1 player. He would have been a top 5 pick. Your general manager was able to move back into the 1st round and move up and go grab a guy at 12 who would have been a top 5 pick in this draft had it not been for a knee injury. Arguably the best wide receiver in this draft. I have no problem with it. I thought it was great.
Nice.
I thought it was a very intelligent move. I got nervous when we found out that there was a trade and it involved the Lions. I think most of us were nervous that it was for a quarterback.
Yeah.
Turns out it was for Jamison Williams. Totally cool with it. The issue I end up having with the pick comes in day 2.
Okay.
When in the 2nd round you take a defensive end. Now, yeah. I get the defensive end, very good player. What, top 5, maybe top 6 end in this draft? So you got a really good player here. But my thought process is, you move up to go grab that wide receiver if you really wanted an end, if you wanted to have bookend edge rushers, you could have got the 3rd best edge rusher in this draft when you traded up to 12. Like, what are we doing? You could have got wide receiver was deep in this draft. You could have got a very good wide receiver. Now look, Jamison Williams has the potential to be absolutely great. All right. But you could have got a very good wide receiver in the second round, in the third round, fourth round, wherever. Wide receivers were all over the place. Now you did get a great one, or you have one that has the potential to be great, but you could have got a good one, and that would have been just fine. And you could have got potentially a great edge rusher. You could have had the number 1 and the number 2 edge rusher in all of the draft. Instead, you get the number 1, and now you've got the number 6 edge rusher in this draft. So I was left more confused and kind of scratching my head with some of the moves that were made on day 2. I think overall, I thought Brad Holmes crushed this draft. And this is kind of the way I judge Lions drafts, because we've been scorned and we've been hurt before. I judge their drafts by basically going into it anticipating that I'm going to be pissed off about something. They're going to do something that's going to make me say, what the fuck were they thinking? Yeah. Why would you do that? That is just stupid. And if I leave the draft and I don't say those words, then it was a good draft. And I know that's kind of setting the bar low, but that's kind of where we've been. If you go back to the Jeff Okudah draft, if you read anything on SI All Lions, I'm extremely tough on that draft, because that draft pissed me off. That draft almost lost me as a Lions fan. I was so upset. And when you look back a couple years later, you've seen that you could have had your franchise quarterback. Whether you believed it was Tua like me, or whether it was Justin Herbert, you could have had your franchise quarterback, but you don't. Instead, you've got a cornerback who's got a bad ACL, who you'll be lucky if he can play that position ever again. So I thought what Brad Holmes did, I thought he nailed this draft. And to be honest with you, looking at this draft, I just kind of want to highlight a couple of picks that I really, really liked. Okay, I liked the Aiden Hutchinson pick. Arguably, he is the best edge rusher in this draft. It's basically a coin flip between him and Thibodeau. Depends on what you're kind of looking for here. This team obviously looking for somebody to build culture. I think he's a culture guy. I think that works, okay? Jameson Williams, already told you about him. Possibly a top 5 pick had it not been for the ACL. Probably the number 1 wide receiver in this draft class had it not been for the ACL, all right? The Joshua Pascal pick, I think he's going to be a very good player. I like the fact that he can play inside, he can play outside, gives you that versatility, allows your defensive coordinator to put him in spots to make plays. I really like that. Look, it was not the position I would have took in the second round, was not the player I would have took in the second round. I would have, if you have hindsight and you're like, okay, this is a guy that I kind of want, I would have did something completely different there. But I think he's going to be a good player. He might be the best pick in this entire draft. We'll see what happens for the Detroit Lions. I really liked the Malcolm Rodriguez pick. 6th round, you go out, you grab a linebacker. You grab a linebacker who can basically do everything that you're looking for a linebacker to do. He can come up, stop the run. He can drop back into coverage. He's quick. He's a guy who he should play day one, because this linebacking core is so piss poor. This linebacking core is so damn bad that this is a guy who should make an immediate impact. And if you're getting production out of your 6th round, I think you're doing a lot of things very, very well. James Houston, I don't really know. For me, really, it's those first 3 picks, and then it's grabbing the linebacker in the 6th round that I really, really liked.
Yeah, absolutely. His tape was crazy, and he went to Jackson State and then just lit it up in terms of sacks and things like that. Can be versatile. And look, it's clear. Lions are looking for try-hard guys that love football, leaders, captain types. So
I want to ask you a question, because you're really close to the situation. Round 5, with the 34th pick, they take James Mitchell, the tight end out of Virginia Tech.
Yeah.
Now, you tell me if I'm reading a little bit too much into this. But I think, 1, it's smart to go in and grab a tight end. I don't know if I would have did that here, but I think it's smart to go grab a tight end. And I think it's smart to go grab a tight end because I'm not really sure what Hawkinson's future is with this team. And I don't know if this front office and this coaching staff know what Hawkinson's future is. And I think this is a way where you try to protect yourself a little bit. Am I reading too much into that?
No, they needed depth. They needed a blocking tight end. They needed a versatile tight end that was going to be willing to do stuff. And you have Brock Wright and James Mitchell, I think, adds a lot of things. And what it is the Lions are looking for guys that will come in, work hard, and maybe not a 5-star dude, somebody that has talent, will make plays, but also is coachable, that will reach their potential. So they're taking guys that make plays and that will do a lot of the things that they're looking for. And you look at safety Kirby Joseph. I mean, ball hawk, has the ability to do a lot of things, taken with pick 97 in the third round.
Did you like that pick?
I did. I think we did a scouting report on him. I'm okay with it. Now, the debate that can be had, okay, so collectively in my mind, it's a B-plus draft, okay? Now, we will in the coming days do a redraft of the same class. You can, look, guys, we are supporters of the Lions. We talk about them every week. We cover them. So when, we have to always preface this, when we say we could do something different, doesn't mean we hate anything, doesn't mean, but our job is to take a critical look at what's going on. I felt the Lions could have, if they wanted to, stayed at number 2 and took in Kayvon Thibodeau, a little bit of swagger, stayed at 32 and taken Lewis Seen, the safety, and then 34, you could have got Christian Watson. Okay, you could have potentially, or you could have gotten a different wide receiver had you decided to stay and not make the trade. So in that sense, I felt like then you go back and you want to trade at number 46. You now potentially, if you wanted to trade up back again, other assets, you could have gotten potentially in your first 4 picks, you could have had Kayvon Thibodeau, Lewis Seen, Christian Watson, and Nakobe Dean.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. The Nakobe Dean's fall was absolutely bonkers to me.
Well, he's undersized. He's undersized, and Malcolm Rodriguez is a similar size. The problem is that you basically now realize that if an NFL team tells you to get surgery, you best not ever, in the history of everdom, tell anybody no. If they say get surgery and you're like no, you're fucked. Because based on talent and what you saw on film, there's no reason. That's not a top. Nakobe Dean is not a player that's going to go way in the 3rd round. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? The Eagles, I think, got a steal. And
for sure.
Exactly. I think that he's going to be motivated and things like that. So I could have looked at the draft differently and stayed and took in players with more talent and maybe not the exact love of football and things like that. But this is the plan. They're taking fits. They're taking culture. They're taking love. They're taking guys who also have high grades and intangibles. Me personally, it's just a different philosophy. I would take less of a leader for more talent. And I just felt like they left talent on the board. Like for me, I'm not scared of anybody else after pick 1, but I am definitely petrified that Kayvon Thibodeau is going to be the next, significant pass rusher, the next Bosa. He's going to have that swagger in New York. And Aiden Hutchinson's going to be that pro that's going to be that fit, doesn't have the numbers, and still be part of a defensive line that struggles. We'll see. We'll see if this new 4-3 front, being more aggressive, pushing forward with linebackers, is going to result in more pressure. But me personally, I'm only alarming the panic button on one player, and that's Aiden Hutchinson. Because at number 2, I don't care how much of a Michigan fanboy you are, he's got to produce. He's got to produce at least 6 sacks a year and be healthy and be part and allow the others on the defensive line to succeed. We'll see. I don't know. I think he's going to have a lot of good games, but I think the problem is going to end up being Kayvon's going to be better. We'll see. I hope I'm wrong, but right now my gut.
Let me ask you this.
My gut tells me Kayvon's better.
So I think we talked about this last week on the podcast. I think Kayvon Thibodeau has a much higher ceiling than Aiden Hutchinson does. But what if Aiden Hutchinson is that guy for this team? What if Aiden Hutchinson is basically that centerpiece that they're allowed to build this defense around?
Well, do you see?
And he provides them the consistency that they need.
Do you see elevated sack numbers, bull rush pressure, and the ability to consistently bull rush in the NFC North? I don't know.
here's the
year
thing.
one.
I think
year one he gets a pass.
I think I think year one he needs to get a pass. I don't think you need to expect 7-8 sacks from him year one. I don't think you need to see him basically destroying quarterbacks every weekend year one. I think what you will see though, and I don't even know if he's that type of guy, right? Like we talk about Kayvon Thibodeau in that same kind of breath, right? Where he's that seek and destroy, go kill the quarterback type of guy. I don't necessarily think Hutchinson is. I think Hutchinson's going to be a disruptor though. I think Hutchinson will be a guy who will help collapse the pocket, put the quarterback into situations. I think he'll have a couple forced fumbles. I think he'll have a couple of sacks. I think he will be a guy who makes other quarterbacks Sundays a nightmare. I don't think it's going to be Kayvon Thibodeau-esque, right, where he's got like 10, 12 sacks. I don't think it's going to be that. But I think it will be something where he has, 7, 8 sacks, and he's got like 3 forced fumbles on the year, and he's just constantly in the mix putting that pressure on the quarterback. And you know what? I would take that. I will take that because that allows you that consistency to be able to build this defense, and it's something this team hasn't had. If you look at their pass rushers, name me the last pass rusher that they had that consistently did anything. I mean, you can go to Ndamukong Suh if you want, but I remember doing shows with you where Ndamukong Suh would disappear for entire games. Like, Ndamukong Suh would just be absent. And I know he wasn't an edge rusher, but they put him in spots, they moved him all over that defensive line trying to get him to create havoc. I think the last time we had somebody who just was kind of a bit of a freak show was DeAndre Levy, and I think there was like a 2-year stretch where you had Ziggy Ansah could just get to the quarterback almost at will. And I think both those guys, when they were freak shows, I think their time crossed over and coincided with each other. And I think that was part of the reason that they were able to do what they did. So it's on top of that, you had Ndamukong Suh. So I think this team needs more pieces along that defensive line. And I think this team needs a linebacker that can do anything, because I don't think either one of us believe that this linebacking core is any good.
Right. That's the part I got to ask in a unique way to get them to answer is, why did you wait till that long to get a linebacker when you needed it so much? Mm-hmm. It's crazy that they invested way later, but they love potentially Jared Davis, Derek Barnes, and that's the trust that they have, is that the coaching staff says, we don't need to have a Nakobe Dean. We have a coaching staff, so we'll see. This is the test. This is what's going to determine the fate of this coaching staff, is to see if they can elevate the likes of a Jared Davis and an Alex Anzalone and a Derek Barnes with the mix that they got. So we'll see. We'll see in regards to how this is all going to shake out. But obviously, they've taken the 8 players that they've taken. The 7th round pick might be a long shot in regards to Chase Lucas making the roster. But is there another player besides Nakobe Dean that you say, well, they could have targeted that they didn't, that you say, well, could haunt the Detroit Lions? Because, you had Leo Chenal that you could have had. You had such a great opportunity to do things that it leaves room for skepticism, where I'm happy with what they did, but you could have redrafted in a completely different way and still maybe gotten the results that you've gotten. So we'll see, because if this goes south for the Detroit Lions, this 2022 draft will be the one that you look to and say, you could have had 5 different guys that you could have taken that would have had impact. Anybody else that we're missing? I'm glad they didn't take Malik Willis. I think that it was clear that smoke was not going to happen in Detroit. This year, they're going to let Jared Goff get the fair evaluation, give him talent, and now he can, 2021, obviously, I asked one of the questions that was the fairest, I think, and the most critical of Brad Holmes. I said, how can you fairly evaluate Jared Goff with the wide receivers you got? And he spilled, he tried to spin it the best way possible, but in the end, my question was worded correctly. I said, the wide receiving core is not the strength yet of this team. How can you evaluate Jared Goff? So they saw it. They knew it. They said, oh shit, our wide receivers suck. So we got a new offensive coordinator, a new scheme, added 3 wide receivers that potentially can do some good things in Josh Reynolds, Jameson Williams, and DJ Chark. And now you can fairly evaluate Jared Goff, and this is his make or break year as we'll progress forward. Anybody else that potentially they could have had, I know Leo Chenal was somebody that was also on my list. But it was Nakobe Dean was the highest. I was like, you could have did it. You could have made the move there. And then if there's nobody else, you're saying if they moved up to 12, they could have taken a defensive end at 12, from Georgia maybe or someone else. If it wasn't Jameson Williams at 12, who else could they have gotten maybe at that spot that would have intrigued you?
So with the trade up to 12, it would have been Jermaine Johnson out of Florida State.
That's juicy.
So, I mean, just think about that,
juicy.
right?
That's real juicy. Hutchinson and Johnson, oh my God.
Exactly. So, like, now your defense is, you've got your bookend edge rushers for the next 5 years.
You got me tingly, bro. That would have been sweet. I didn't think of that because he fell, so the narrative is something's up, but, oh man, that would have been something. Yeah, exactly. That's what we're saying is they sacrificed a little bit of talent that could have been had. And that will be the decision. Was the time right to trade up when you had 32 and 34? You could have added two more players.
So if you don't make that trade with Minnesota, right? So we go to the third round now. Brian Asamoah was a guy who I was high on, the linebacker out of Oklahoma. Also a guy who you were high on, the guy who I was high on, Chad Mumba out of Wyoming was available for them to take. Even if you were to go with the trade, right? So now we start moving down in the draft and you're looking at who might have been available. Like Nakobe Dean at this point is gone. Nakobe Dean's a guy who I think they could have and possibly should have taken. Obviously medical issues and a couple of other things really held against him and prevented him from going. But Channing Tyndale was there, Leo Chenal was there, and those were two guys that I think both of us were extremely high on. And then depending on what you wanted to do with your tight end, you could have got Jeremy Ruckert from Ohio State, who ends up going at 37 in the third round. So, I mean, there were a couple of guys you could have added. I'll be honest with you, I was a little upset when Kenneth Walker came off the board. I was kind of hoping that he would somehow make his way to the Lions, and we was going to put them in a weird spot if he fell to them in round 2, where they would have to make a decision. And could you imagine having the Thunder and Lightning with those two, with DeAndre Swift and Kenneth Walker in that backfield? Like, at that point, you can grade Jared Goff. Like, Jared Goff, you have tools. Go do something.
I like it. And they made the move again to trade down. I thought that was good on the second day, to kind of to handle your business. And I thought that the trades were fair. You got your 8 picks that you wanted. I think history's going to treat this draft fairly, but there's going to be just that nagging suspicion that there could have been 2 more players they could have had that might have had some impact. So we'll see. We'll see if this philosophy works because, we're not that far from saying, God, just bring talent and bring healthy talent. Please don't let it be where Jameson Williams has a setback, or please don't let it be James Mitchell has a setback, or all the injured guys have a setback, because you bank on health. You're banking on health. So make sure that this is this is something that will end up being sustainable and something where you can get up to 6 to 8 wins in 2022. Cause that was fun. That was a fast hour. That was the fastest hour of the week for me. And the blessing is now we'll have more opportunities to go a little bit longer as minicamp hits and the Tigers are going. So it'll be a fun time as we progress through the coming weeks here on the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. Make sure you follow Adam Strozinski at Adam R. STROZ. Follow the network at Detroit Podcast. If you've agreed or disagreed with anything that we've said, hit us up. Let us know. We're in the mix. Joe Macaroon here, bringing all the noise and getting all the reports that you guys love. And even though aggregators might not get my name right, it was cool to see a blog that I read regularly include content from SIL Lions. And it was great stuff, and it's all fun and things like that. You guys have allowed us in the podcast game to really, really take things forward. All the major outlets are doing them, and it was my pleasure, and I could share this story with you. One of the Lions workers said, well, it's probably about that time that I start a podcast. And I said, yeah, the water's warm. And it's not a bad gig. It's not a bad thing to do. And it's so sweet to be able to talk highly about the podcast game and how impactful it can be to hear, stories being told, people appearing on podcasts, athletes starting podcasts, big major outlets doing podcasts. We were here doing it since 2013 because we loved it. And really, I'm excited. I rush home from responsibilities to be able to chit-chat and have a sports conversation with my guy, Adam, the Jock Strozinski. Subscribe, listen, enjoy, and rewind, and be happy. So let's get after it, cuz I look forward to talking to you next week.
You too, Joe. Good job.